to The Splash. It's your boys. Thank you for diving on in with us. It's Tico.
And Carter.
And today we are talking about something very near and dear to our hearts. Today we are discussing not only Milestone Media, not only the legend Dwayne McDuffie, but also the newest and latest release, DC and Milestone's recent crossover comic book. I don't know if you got a chance to read it. I've had my own little bit of research.
I haven't, but I hear it's been like really taking shall I say, the internet by storm, and there's a bit of a storm surrounding this new release. If I'm getting this correctly, last time I was checking, the release was kind of centered around kind of bringing Static into the DC universe. Not that he isn't already in it, but like really getting I don't want to say full control over it, but like kind of reinventing the character a bit, giving him like his own reboot.
Yeah. So basically the I cannot remember the name of it at the moment, but basically with the latest edition, basically the story starts off with Beacon, Rocket's son, and Static's protege in the future. He is fighting this villain Shiv when a time disruption starts erasing his timeline. So he chooses to go back in time to figure out what's going on. Now, if you remember the Flashpoint comic with the Flash where he ran and he changed timeline events, it's kind of along those lines, only instead of him changing the events of the past, he's finding out why these events happened in the first place. And these heroes are basically reclaiming their name and their legacy. And a lot of the things that I found out through the fan base and through the supporters on Reddit, Twitter, Instagram, Threads, and all that good stuff, President Lex Luthor blackmailed the Milestone heroes into a forced retirement pretty much. And in order to spare Dakota City from, crooked politicians and hostile takeovers and stuff like that,
that's what they're calling it.
Yeah. So it was a very meta decision that they made. And it was a very meta decision and kind of like in a way a call out to the fact that when DC bought out Milestone, it kind of undermined a lot of black voices in the art form.
I'm sorry, I need to cut you off there. DC bought Milestone?
Yeah, DC bought Milestone. They're their official distributor. So when people think like, hey, why haven't we had a Static Shock cartoon in like the last 20 years? Yeah, they got some parts with the animation, but because that IP is not fully owned by DC, it's kind of a shared IP, kind of like the Spider-Man Marvel DC situation. They can use him within limits. So the goal was for this latest comic to drop at least, I don't want to say like the official sources. None of them have said it. It's only been like circulated, so I'll never say it's facts. But if they were to sell like 100,000 copies, it will put Milestone in a good standing to where they can continue to get releases. And thankfully, a lot of fans have been buying it.
Again, I hate to play devil's advocate, but like when you say bought out Milestone, like how if a company buys out another company, technically the company that bought them out would benefit. How would Milestone as a publication still benefit? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, got you. So basically, since there are the big two, Marvel and DC, the third, of course, Image Comics. If you are getting a distribution deal through DC, that means your characters are at the forefront. Icon, Static.
True.
Rocket, for example, like those characters aren't necessarily household names yet, but they are easily identifiable when it comes to the big black heroes that we all really know.
True, but I mean, that still is like within, don't get me wrong, to you and me, Static, Icon, Hardware, Blood Syndicate, Rocket, they're established to us. But to, I think, like the general populace, I have to say that you have to admit, it would be overwhelmingly Static. You know what I'm saying?
Definitely.
And it's not to say that it's not to say these other characters don't have promise. I mean, they do. I mean, they're great characters. But, at least what I got from the whole controversy is it seems like DC wants Static to themselves, cast everyone else, your Icon, your Rocket, your Hardware, your Blood Syndicate, just off to the side. But the funny thing is, and I don't want to go too deep, this is for our next segment, but I was under the impression that DC had the publishing deal distribution, but they still retain complete control, not just of Static, but any, it could be Icon, it could be even the company as a whole. Like DC can't like push its weight around and say like, hey, Milestone, we're going this way, you are too. You know what I mean?
Right, which is part of the whole reason why they're trying so adamantly to get this book out. They're having a second release, thankfully, because it sold out like almost immediately because fans kind of caught wind of, hey, why is it that we only see Static Shock as a side character? Why do we only see Static Shock there for someone else's character development without his actual own stories? Like last year around November, we finally got a Batman Beyond and Static crossover. It was kind of a fire comic.
That's true.
I love
That's true.
that
I
comic.
agree with that.
But I think it's just kind of funny that like we really haven't really heard any of the big names, and a lot of the comments and criticism in the reviews was we don't see a lot of the classic villains in this issue. We do get to see Blood Syndicate, thankfully. We get to see Rocket, we get to see Static, we get to see Beacon. But like a lot of fans are still kind of like hoping that in the second issue we can see more of that milestone thing. Like, of course we want to see some of the Justice League crossover. True. We want to see that because now the universe is together. Icon's still born in the 1800s. Static is still a part of the Teen Titans in some form or fashion. We still want those stories, but it's also the case of we want the original stories being made that the owners of Milestone have been pushing out for years now. So I think now with that first release being so successful, they're in a better position to retain their own IP without any kind of risk. Because, you know, low sales, you might end up low balled.
True.
High sales, your product is up there. You know, people are talking about it.
True, but I mean, well, I don't think this would be the best scenario, but like our last episode we talked about Wonder Man, like Doorman came into the forefront. Like I heard about him through the zeitgeist. So I wouldn't say necessarily like even if it doesn't sell well, like do you completely like, you know, erase the character from existence? That's a whole, you know, I mean, that's a whole another discussion in it for itself. But, you know, it could be like a secondary character where they just kind of blend into the background or be an aiding character. Like, again, he opens a door for people to walk through. Not saying that Static has that. I mean, let's just be honest. Like Static, I don't know why people just don't give him the proper dues.
You know,
and with that, I'd say that let's actually before we get into his proper dues, we need to kind of get into more of the creators behind Static, Icon, and Rocket. And we'll get into that in our next segment. Thank you for diving back in with us. We've been talking Milestone Media this morning, or should I say this day. Tico, we've been talking about the Dakota incident that recently just dropped, but we got to go back in time a little bit, and I want to kind of dive into like the creators behind Milestone Media, and again, the wonderfully great characters that is Static, Icon, Rocket, Hardware. You got to tell me about Senor Dwayne McDuffie.
Let me tell you about the man, the myth, and the legend Dwayne McDuffie. And for that, I will have to use my trap card to really get into it. And I'll start with a quote for real. I'm conscious of race whenever I'm writing, just as I'm conscious of class, religion, human psychology, politics, everything that makes up the human experience. I don't think I can do a good job if I'm not paying attention to what's meaningful to people in an American culture. There isn't anything that informs human interaction more than the idea of race. I learned about this quote way back in the day, and this way inspired me to become a writer. Dwayne McDuffie is one of my favorite writers of all time. The Detroit native was a master's in physics, if you would believe that. He got his BA in English, but he's a physics master. Like, you know, kind of brain you have to do physics, you know?
No, I agree.
He started off as an assistant editor with Marvel Comics. After being a copy editor for a while, some of his most notable work is through, you know, What's New Scooby-Doo. He wrote the entire second season of Justice League Unlimited.
Really?
Yeah.
Man, I'm sorry to go down a tangent, but like I really miss those times. Like, oh man,
nostalgia, man. I wish we had a nostalgia button. We can just nostalgia, little nostalgia.
I really hope just to let you know, those like all those episodes where you had like a brief interaction with Mr. Terrific. I was like, I hope he was part of that.
Man, I really hope he was. I was looking up and down his IMDb page whenever I was like,
no, I saw, and that's what I was like, yo, you like when you saw me like What's New Scooby Doo, I was like, no, you're kidding me, right? Sorry, continue.
Yeah, no, you're good. And like, you know, he did a lot of his work through Marvel. He eventually, and you'll get into this in our next segment, he eventually joined up with the other brothers and made Milestone Media.
What do you like? What was his like? You break down his background, but like he had to have some importance of like telling the story sort of quote unquote our way.
Oh, of course, of course, of course. Like that was his main thing when he really got started in the 80s. Like by 89, he was already assistant editor. And he released an editorial actually that I brought a copy of today.
Please.
And it was his proposal for a new series. And it's a little satirical, but a little serious.
Just say the name.
Just say the name. Okay. It's called the Teenage Negro Ninja Thrashers. If you go on Google, look it up. You can find it on Reddit. You can find it on official websites. It basically is just kind of satirizing all the tropes that they used to do with black characters in the 90s, where you would kind of shoehorn them into someone else's plot for their character development or they're otherwise a side character. Some of the things he pointed out was those characters have bizarre speech patterns that no one really recognized. There was always a smart white friend to help them out of trouble.
Yeah.
And the heroes could be just like you, but they're just black. And it kind of is funny because when I was looking this up, I also found this other thing. It was kind of like this interview he had, a real short interview he had. Basically, someone asked him, trying to be funny, what if a white person dressed up as Static Shock? How would he respond? How would he react? His exact words, and this is why he's such he's like one of the best people out there. He said that he would love to see a white Static Shock because that would mean Static wouldn't just be a black superhero anymore. He says...
No, I can understand the thought process behind that. It makes sense because, again, well, for example, what what is it recently that, we've seen, a black Superman? I'm not talking, Icon, but I mean, I'm blanking. Val Zod. That's what I'm thinking of. But, to say that, Superman's kind of transitioned out of, Clark Kent to this character, which, by the way, is legitimate, even though he's technically from another Earth. It's not like you just kind of slapstick on. This is kind of like what I was mentioning in the Wonder Man episode. It just seems like you just kind of slapped on a black actor and just said here you go. Right. And it's not to say that the actor itself didn't do the character justice, but it's we can tell our own stories with our own characters.
Right.
That hit home.
Exactly. That's the main thing he was trying to get at. The black character doesn't have to just be a black character. You can enjoy that character because it's a character. He has goals, ambitions, a story that you can follow. Even if you can't see yourself in the pigment, you can still see yourself in the themes of that story.
I mean, this is speculative here, but do you ever think that, for example, say he's okay, his own creation is okay being depicted in, as a white character. Do you ever think there could be a downside to that? Maybe the stories don't hit the same way or it doesn't resonate with the same audience as it once did. You know what I'm saying? It's speculative, of course.
Of course. Even if you made that character Choctaw or Cherokee or Hijabi or Arab or anything, you're changing dynamics of that character and you do have to consider, okay, well, I was writing about a black kid in Illinois. Now I'm writing about a Mexican kid or a Laotian kid in Illinois. That dynamic is going to be very different. That community that he interacts with is going to be very different. Yes, America is a melting pot, but we still have unique experiences that deserve to be put out there.
Well, I mean, to your point about it's a melting pot, it's we're all a bunch of different communities. Again, being born in Los Angeles that I am, I'm thankful enough to be born in a realm that's, again, you have your... not to lack for a better term, your Chinatown, your little Tokyo. For some of the Latin areas, I mean, there's actually a little Guatemala in Los Angeles. Word. And, I mean, just as you said, a melting pot, but everybody carries their own traditions, their own communities, their own customs, their own food, language, music, you name it. And to get into more of that community basis, or at least the products of the community that can come out of that, we'll touch later into Milestone Media's publication history.
Hey, welcome back, good people. Thank you for diving in with us one more time. And as we said, we're going to get more into Milestone Media. So tell me, who did Dwayne McDuffie start that with? How did that go?
Well, actually, to be honest, originally it was three people. It was Dennis Cowan and Michael Davis. All three originally were a part of the comic book industry themselves. Dennis Cowan was actually he drew for Batman and also The Question. And it's kind of weird because I recently came into the first ever debut of The Question, and I noticed the artwork there also is very reminiscent of what you find in Milestone Media, at least what they were releasing during the 90s in the style. But one thing that I learned about it was it's in learning about Milestone, the publication, you had to kind of take in consideration where the marketplace was with everything. So again, your point, as you said, like black characters, for at least for superheroes, you're being essentially typecasted. It's very cookie cutter. Like, hey, you're a black superhero, but like most of your power sets or most of your abilities kind of stem from like, should I say, the white dominant society,
Right.
versus where they wanted to, how can I say this, big for their time, tell their own stories, but kind of go a step further. Something that I don't even think they, or even at the time, we even thought was even possible. Not just create their own characters, create their own universe, but let's create our own publication. So, mind you, this is the 80s and the 90s. And especially during the 90s, I only recall this best from like Morbius, because I remember like when they first debuted him, he had like kind of a really hardcore, like metal grunge look. But like that time period, people were just throwing out comics like left and right, Batman, Spider-Man, like a lot of stuff.
Yeah, the 90s was a boom.
Not to mention also, I can't remember the specifics, like the range of like when Marvel was kind of in a recession, because mind you, this is before 98 when the Blade trilogy kind of revamped Marvel to what we have it is now. To an extent, you could also say Spider-Man also helped along the way, but Blade, let's be honest.
Yeah,
Blade was only
movie-wise,
too far off.
Blade brought Marvel back into the...
Basically. And one of the things that like Cowan said this best, he's like, you know, I want to create a black-owned company that could own its own destiny. And I think that speaks to volumes, especially in our community, because if you look throughout our collective communal history, like we've done our own efforts. I mean, Black towns, Black Wall Street, Black business ventures. We have politicians, lawyers. We just had a Black president not too long ago. You know, the list, you've done it. I can't think of one that we haven't. But realistically, to say you actually own your own destiny, like that puts agency back into somebody. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely. And it goes back right to where I misspoke earlier when I said buyout. That was the wrong terminology. They actually just have a deal with DC for distribution. And it kind of ties back into them being able to tell their Black stories and use their voices to tell those stories. It relies on us as fans to support them with that work so that they can have the opportunity, even with this distribution deal that they have, so that they can maintain their most popular IP.
Matter of fact, since you mentioned the deal, do you know how they got it?
How did they get that deal? I
Well,
don't know.
the thing is, so this was around about around like circa 1992, big stiff competition. So they themselves still working for, again, the bigger companies, Marvel, DC, as they were, and they're still keeping their day jobs. They're designing characters. And I mean, like, it's crazy stuff. Like, hey, how would you like a character that can ride around on a little tiny coin-like disc and has the powers of electricity? Hey, why don't we get an alien that lands down here that takes the form of the closest person to him in the rural South, which at this point was an enslaved woman. You know, like stuff that I don't even think at the time they were just like, let me just pencil this down on scratch paper. You know what I'm saying? So like, even for themselves, I don't even think they really saw the big, like, full picture of what this could be. Yeah. But then also, Paul Levitz, the then DC director, the DC executive director, executive vice president at the time. I keep butchering my words. I apologize. He gets a hold of the Bible of the Dakota universe. It's that book I was telling you earlier about, like how, you know, it lists static. It lists the how the Dakotaverse operates. Like, again, like the DC universe has like certain rules. Like, for example, like one rule DC knows, like, you kind of don't really want to know Joker's origin story because that kind of defeats the purpose.
Right. It ruins
you know
the origin story when you give it one.
So he got it, was impressed by it, and was like, yo, who are these guys? Let's take a journey. Let's take a chance, literally. And sure enough, they enter into a partnership, which we're going to get into more so right after the break. Thank you for diving back in with us, y'all. We've been talking Milestone publication, the history of it, most of this morning. And just to kind of piggyback off of what I was saying last time about the partnership, you know, DC decides to take a chance. And they call in, at the time, Cowan, Michael Davis, and Dwayne McDuffie. But they also got a fourth person, Derek Dingle, who he isn't specifically like a comic artist or writer specifically, he's a journalist, but he had a business background to really like kind of take the company. Again, like there's an artistic vision, of course, but he also has your corporate commercial interest.
Right.
Again, some boxes have to be checked.
Absolutely.
But the biggest thing that I gotta say, this is my assumption at this point. I'm hoping this part came from our business savvy guru Dingle, but Milestone needed, shall I say, a very powerful friend, for lack of a better phrase. They found that very powerful friend in DC, but with a caveat. They would not sign off on this deal unless A, they could have full creative control over all their characters, hardware, static, icon, you name it, and then also direct the company. I'm also probably reaching here, but I've noticed myself, because I've been a big follower of DC ever since I was a kid, but I've been more attracted to like the Vertigo, I don't want to say universe, but more so like their spin on comics, because they're more darker, edgy.
I like their
the V for
stories.
Vendetta. Your Constantine, your Hellblazers in there as an example. But to know that you could still produce with a big giant like that and still retain control of it, like that's pretty huge. You know what I'm saying? Because like you're still getting out your content, but you're still creating control. And that's not something that's just so easy.
Yeah, you aren't just getting those kind of deals unless you have the proof of product. You know,
like I mean, to segue off of this a little bit. Like I'm sorry jumping into the story, but like as much as I love hip hop and I love De La Soul, like it was hard for like they're just now getting able to release projects that they've had for so long on their own and capitalize on that, because for so long the record company was getting it. So at that time to get that at that deal
in the 90s of all time,
exactly,
like, that is miraculous.
It's a huge thing. For any of you interested, like the first ever comic release was Hardware in February of 1993, and sorry, I gotta flip through my notes here a bit. One of the biggest thing was like with it was like the diversity, because again, there wasn't much diversity there. Like you mentioned before, everything for black characters was basically cookie cutter, and then also the staff wasn't as diverse. You know, like you don't just have just black characters in that Dakota universe.
Nah, there's like Blood Syndicate is combined of a bunch of races for starters.
But I mean, like think about it, like, you know, we can tell the black experience. I can't speak to, you know, the history of Asians in this country or Latinos in this country. You know what I'm saying? Like only those people or those specific communities can tell those stories. But to still keep them in the fold when you're introducing new characters like that, come on, like that's revolutionary. I mean, again, by 1995, if you were in the comic industry, working at Milestone was a place to be. Absolutely. Like literally. The only thing where I have to say this is where it gets kind of dicey is the content they were releasing was definitely risque, at least for obviously your retailers, your corporate buyers, and your executives. And the guys in the
shameless plug. If y'all do want to catch all those reading recommendations, we'll have an article put up on our website WNCT-TV.com about that. But continue.
Definitely, and then also something that we've been kind of teasing around as an idea, because now with Black History Month kind of on the sideline, we're coming up on Women's History Month, if I'm not mistaken, and that's something that we kind of want to tease a little bit. But we're gonna debut or shall I say, reintroduce a character that doesn't really get enough limelight, and she also has a very unique backstory in terms of her own established character arc, character design, and also new, shall I say, latest installation into the MCU universe. And for that, tune in next time or dive back in with us next time for Captain Marvel. This has been The Splash Guys. I'm Carter.
And I'm Tico, and thank you for diving in.